Disruption. We hear that word thrown around all the time, right? But what does it actually look like? Sometimes it's a sudden, chaotic collapse. Other times, it's a revolution that's been planned down to the last detail. And sometimes, it's a force that's been quietly reshaping our world for thousands of years. Today, we're going to tell a tale of 3 completely different disruptions, all to uncover the one constant thread that ties them all together.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with the absolute meltdown of India's biggest airline. Then we'll switch gears to look at the very deliberate disruption of AI in our shopping habits. From there, we'll jump back in time to a simple die that built and broke entire empires. And finally, we'll connect all those dots to see what these stories tell us about the nature of change itself. Okay, so our first story, it's all about what happens when a really complex system just breaks. We're looking at the operational freefall of IndiGo, India's largest airline, where the fallout was immediate, chaotic, and deeply, deeply personal. And this right here is the human cost, all captured in a viral video. In the middle of all the chaos at a jam-packed airport, this was a father's desperate shout. It just cuts through all the corporate jargon and technical excuses to show you the real-world impact of a system failing, pure helplessness and frustration.
And the sheer scale of this failure? It was just staggering. Over just a few days, more than 1,300 flights were canceled. 1,300! For an airline that basically has a monopoly on domestic travel in the country, this wasn't just some inconvenience. It was a nationwide travel paralysis.
So how on earth did it happen so fast? Well, it wasn't one big event. It was like a domino effect. It started small with a few delays on December 2nd. The next day, the airline blamed technical glitches. By the 4th, cancellations were piling up. And by the 5th, the entire network was in what everyone was calling a total meltdown. It's a perfect example of how fragile these complex systems can be.
So what was actually behind this meltdown? Turns out, it wasn't just one thing, but this perfect storm of problems all hitting at once. You had a software update advisory, new, tougher rules on pilot rest just kicking in, and on top of that, reports of a cabin crew shortage. Any one of those might have been manageable, but all together, they just exposed how brittle the whole system was. The official statement really said it all, a critical misjudgment and gap in planning by the airline.
And for the passengers stuck in the middle of all this, the financial pain was immediate and brutal. While IndiGo's planes were stuck on the ground, other airlines cranked up their prices like crazy. A flight from Mumbai to Delhi that's normally about 5,000 rupees suddenly shot up to over 51,000. I mean, talk about crisis opportunism.
You know who else noticed? The market, of course. The company's stock took a 3% nosedive. So while passengers were dealing with the chaos on the ground, investors were reacting to the chaos on their screens. It just goes to show you, an operational failure very quickly becomes a financial one. And that brings us to our second story, a completely different kind of disruption.
So now we're going to pivot. We're going from a disruption born out of total chaos to one that's, well, born from code. This story is all about a change that isn't an accident. It's a meticulously planned, fast-moving revolution in how we all discover, compare, and buy things. Yep, welcome to the age of the AI shopper. And that brings up a really crucial question, right? What happens when the force of change isn't a system breaking down, but a brand new system being built on purpose to replace the old one? See, unlike the IndiGo crisis, this disruption is happening by design, and businesses are being told pretty clearly to either adapt or get left behind.
I mean, just look at how fast this is happening. A whopping 43% of Canadian holiday shoppers are planning to use AI tools this season. The big takeaway here is that this isn't some niche tech for early adopters anymore. It has officially gone mainstream.
So what are people actually using it for? Well, the top reason, at 41%, is to compare features and prices. But it's really about the whole journey. 31% use it to discover new stuff, almost a quarter use it to check if reviews are legit, and others just want help finding a gift on a tight budget, or even just taking some of the stress out of it all. AI is basically becoming your personal shopping assistant.
So to deal with this, Google is basically giving retailers a playbook for survival. And the advice is pretty direct. Make sure your online and in-store experiences are totally seamless. And, this is the big one, improve your product content so that AI can actually find it and understand what it is. The game isn't just about making a pretty web page for human eyes anymore. It's about feeding the right data to the algorithm.
All right, so we've talked about an airline named IndiGo. Now let's talk about the actual IndiGo, the die that gave us the color. To really get a handle on the patterns of disruption, we have to look back. This is the story of a simple plant that created a color so valuable it was called blue gold. And in the process, it sparked new trade routes, brutal colonial exploitation, and eventually, its own technological death.
You have to understand, for most of human history, the color blue was incredibly rare and super expensive to make. Indigo, which came from the fermented leaves of a plant, totally changed the game. It became a status symbol, a form of currency, a source of unbelievable wealth, something reserved for royalty and the most important ceremonies all around the world.
And this timeline, wow, it just shows you how deep these roots go. We're talking about evidence of it 8,000 years ago in Peru. Then in 1498, it explodes as a global trade commodity. By 1859, it's the spark for a major revolt against colonial rule in India. And then, in 1905, science delivers the final blow, a synthetic version that changes absolutely everything. But here's the thing about disruption. It's almost never welcomed by the people it's about to replace. When ships loaded with cheap, high-quality indigo from India started showing up in Europe, the local dye makers, who used a less vibrant native plant, completely freaked out. They actually launched a smear campaign against it, calling it the devil's dye and threatening anyone who dared to use it. And this was the so-called devil they were so afraid of. Woad was the old guard, the established domestic industry. Indigo was the new kid on the block, a foreign competitor that was just better, cheaper, and stronger. It's the classic story of protectionism fighting a battle it's destined to lose against a superior technology, or in this case, a superior plant.
But in a classic twist, the thing that finally disrupted the global indigo trade wasn't another plant or a new trade route. It was a chemist in a lab. When Adolphe von Bayard figured out how to make synthetic indigo in the late 1800s, the dye became cheap and available to absolutely everyone. The massive blue gold plantations that had propped up entire economies for centuries just withered away, almost overnight.
Okay, so let's recap. We've got a modern airline collapsing, a planned AI revolution in how we shop, and a historical dye that literally reshaped the world. 3 wildly different stories. But if you put them all side by side, a clear and really powerful pattern starts to emerge about the unchanging nature of disruption itself. Let's just break this down. With the indigo crisis, the catalyst was a system failure, the impact was chaos, and the human response was pure anger. For AI and retail, the catalyst is technology, the impact is convenience, and the response is adoption and adaptation. And with the indigo dye, the catalyst was global trade and science. The impact was massive economic and social upheaval, and the response was resistance, then revolt, and finally, acceptance. You see the pattern here? The stories are different, but the core elements are the same. And that really is the core idea here. It doesn't matter if a disruption is an accident, like a system collapse, or if it's totally intentional, like rolling out a new technology. The fundamental mechanics are always the same. A system changes, it has a huge impact on people, and it forces everyone to adapt. Whether that's passengers scrambling for new flights, retailers building new strategies, or an entire industry being replaced.
So all of this leaves us with one big question. We've seen the patterns from the past, and we're seeing them in the present. We know the core elements: system change, human impact, and adaptation. They're always going to be there. The only question left is, where and how are they going to show up next?